walk us through the timeline of how we got here over the past couple of decades, because obviously it starts with this idea that, and I guess maybe there is a counter narrative where, sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, Al Gore sits on a commission and says, we're going to basically have an authentication, a government-sponsored authentication verification thing. Like your driver's license, your passport, your TSA, whatever it is, you get it. We're going to charge a one-time $35 fee or $10 fee or whatever it is, the way that we do with a license. And boom, you are Sam Seder on the web in any construct. You don't need to use, and even at that time, I don't think we had this idea where you could enter into people's spaces, but you didn't have like a terms of service that would only allow you to enter spaces without one of these. That did not happen at that time. And
yep.
So, but what happened over the past 25 or so years that got us to where we are now?
I think one is exactly that point, the point about the digital identity, which I made before and you very kindly repeated. But there is also another development, which I find it very difficult to believe that we could have handled it. Well, we could have handled it different, but it's a huge event. The great financial collapse of 2008. Because come to think of it, completely independently of the internet, completely independently of digital identities and all that, 20 years of financialization, for separate reasons, led to the collapse of Wall Street. And the collapse of Wall Street led to the collapse of the British banks in the City of London and the German and the French banks and the never-ending crisis of the European Union. So the West, the North Atlantic economies went into a huge spasm. In April of 2009, after Obama took over, there was a meeting in London in April 2009 between the presidents, the prime ministers, and the central bankers of the G7. And they decided, in their infinite wisdom, to solve the problem by means of a combination of what I call, this is my term, right? Socialism for the bankers. They printed $35 trillion to give to the bankers. $35 trillion together, all of them, the G7 together, from 2009 to last year. 35 trillion. It's a considerable sum, right? While at the same time, to compensate supposedly for this largesse, they practiced austerity on the majority of our populations. Even the Obama administration, the stimulus was not really a stimulus, as we very well know now, because if you add the federal government stimulus to the state retrenchment, the net effect in the United States was austerity. And here in Europe, here in Greece, we were the world champion, record holders of austerity, right? In Britain and so on. So you have, North America and Europe, including Britain, austerity for the many, low levels of demand, lots of money in the financial circuits. This combination of huge liquidity in the financial circuits and low levels of demand, what it meant was that, when the, Bank of America people or the Citi people or the, Société Générale Bank in France picked up the phone and called an industrialist, either General Motors or even Apple and so on. And they said, I've got, 500 million here that I just printed. Would you like it? I just received it from the central bank. Would you like it? Now, these industrialists would look out of the window and see little people, impecunious, little people with very little money to buy high-end, high value-added stuff, right? So they said, well, I don't want this money. I'm not going to invest. The people out there don't have what it takes in order to purchase high-end products. But the banker was insistent because the banker's nightmare is to have money that the central bank gives them that they don't pass on.
Because they want that money to go to work for them and be making more money, essentially.
So they would say to them, they would say to the industrialists, look, take it, I'll give it to you for free, 0 interest rate. Because they were getting it at negative interest rate from the central bank. So, even that was a good deal for the banker. So in the end, General Motors and Volkswagen got the money because it was free. But they didn't invest it. They took it to the stock exchange and they bought back their own shares, because that's how they kept their share prices high, and therefore their bonuses high, because the directors' bonuses are linked to the share price. Okay, the only capitalists who invested in actual capital were the owners of cloud capital, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, the Musks, and so on. And this is in my book, this is the story I tell. So there is an inexorable force that buffets world capitalism, at least North Atlantic capitalism, which is the force of financialization that gives rise to Lehman Brothers and then the collapse and then everything I've just been describing, which creates $36 trillion for capitalists to invest. But then there is austerity and the lack of a digital identity that identifies each one of us, which allows them to colonize and privatize the internet at the same time as this period of almost 2 decades, during which the state has given them trillions to invest in this cloud capital. And that is, for me, the beginnings of techno-feudalism.
And to what extent, I mean, so this is the monetary policy ends up providing the fuel for this. And there is no government, the fiscal policy, I guess, is the austerity, which also sort of like almost like creates the path in which this money is going to flow downhill, essentially. And it's like a Pachinko game that half of it's been like blocked off on some level. But was there also an opportunity at this time? I mean, Obama could have said, instead of giving money to the banks, we're going to give the money to the homeowners first. They can pay off the banks and also expend the money. But that would have been a program of that had nothing to do with austerity at that point. It would have been a very different program in terms of where the money would cycle through. We wouldn't have the housing crunch, et cetera, that we have today. But was there also an opportunity? Was this a perfect storm because we also are living, or at least had been living, in a regulatory era of where antitrust was completely obliterated? In other words, were we living in an era of antitrust like we have now, and that was in 2008 or 2000 for that matter, or never had changed? Would that have perhaps changed this ability for Amazon to be the marketplace, essentially, or all of these entities having the ability to corner verification and just becoming, like, to use would that have been the sheep sort of era for us, where we could have moved a little bit more, I guess, as a cloud surfs, we could have moved around a little bit more?
I think we're on the same page. So let me take those two strands of your presentation question. The first, it was a deregulation of the Clinton era, which on the one hand unleashed the financial genie from the bottle, with Wall Street going berserk, with the CDOs, the CDSs, the CDO squares and all, which led to the collapse in 2008, which then led to the 35 trillion. So that's one. And the ideology in neoliberalism that the market knows best, and therefore you don't need antitrust, you don't need regulation. The state is always at fault when it tries to double guess the market. That was part of the crime against logic at the time in the 1990s. But then I have to say that Barack Obama, even though he's a very nice man, I mean, I've met him personally, he's lovely. Nevertheless, I think he's going to go down in history as responsible for, amongst other things, the malice of Donald Trump. Yeah. Because for exactly the same reasons as you put it. Why on earth did he save the bankers? The banks had to be saved because the banks are part of they're like the arteries of the capitalist system. If they are severed, then the whole thing goes, pear-shaped, like it did in 1929. But why save the bankers? Why refloat the derivatives market with the Geithner-Summers plan? Do you remember the Geithner-Summers plan?
Yes.
That was a crime against logic.
We're going to foam the runway, essentially.
And it was just a spectacular example of socialism for the worst criminals of the financial sector. Okay? And Obama oversaw this. And that created a discontent, which then led later on to Donald Trump being able to talk about, draining the swamp and all that rubbish, which of course he never did because he took the same people from Wall Street and put them in the Treasury. Right. So yeah, we are on the same page. It was the irrational exuberance of the late 1980s. Wall Street, the movie by Oliver Stone captured that quite nicely, but also the 1990s deregulatory craze. And it was just a complete craze. It was just really unscrupulous people commanding political power in Washington, but also not only in Washington. It started also a bit earlier in London, in Berlin, in Paris, in Athens, here in Greece. And they just went berserk, letting these people effectively create their own ATM in their own living room or office, printing money, private money, and placing bets. And those bets at some point came tumbling down. And when that happened, they practiced austerity on the many and socialism on the few again. And there's no conspiracy. The beauty of this is that there's no conspiracy. None of them knew that the result would be what I call techno-feudalism. None of them. I'm not claiming that they knew, that they had an intention. They had no idea. I didn't have any idea. It's just that, that's how history works. Right. History is the result of unintended consequences of various choices that we make, or to be more precise, that those with the power to usurp our democracies make.
I would agree with that. I guess I would nitpick and say the consequences, they got the consequences they wanted. There were other unintended consequences, but it was pay us the money. And that is the most important thing. The Michael Frohmans, the Geithners, the Rubins, all of those folks basically said, if you save the banks, you save everybody. And sure. But we're not as worried about the everybody. You just got to trust us on that. They all got their money. They short of maybe, I guess, Bear Stearns, they all got their money. Maybe Lehman Brothers. But as a class, they all got their money, and then they turned around and made more of that money through the sort of now our techno overlords, as it were.